What if one of the most thrilling war films ever made was built on real pain, buried secrets, and a few dangerous lies? The Great Escape wasn't just a story about courage, it was a movie where actors bled, stunts went wrong, and truth blurred into legend. Behind every tunnel and every jump was something Hollywood didn't want you to see. So, how much of this masterpiece was real, and how much was smoke, mirrors, and ego? Let's dig in. Steve McQueen nearly quit. This wasn't just a movie about escape, it was a movie about control, especially Steve McQueen's. McQueen, already a rising icon, hated that his character Hiltz didn't dominate enough of the story. When he saw early drafts, he stormed off set, saying, "This isn't the Cooler Kings movie, it's everyone else's." The solution? The producers rewrote scenes to give him more solo action, including the legendary motorcycle chase. McQueen personally choreographed the stunts, even disguised himself as a pursuing German soldier in one sequence so he could literally chase himself on camera. The studio called it risky, McQueen called it perfection. That chase wasn't just the film's highlight, it was his self-directed rebellion. In the end, he got what he wanted: speed, spotlight, and a permanent mark on cinema history. The real escape was much darker than the movie. What audiences didn't realize was how grim the true story really was. The Great Escape is based on an actual 1944 breakout from the Stalag Luft 3rd prison camp. But unlike the film's daring adventure tone, the real escape ended in tragedy. Of the 76 men who fled, only 3 made it home. The rest were captured and 50 were executed by the Gestapo under Hitler's direct orders. Producer Paul Brickhill, himself a POW in the same camp, had lived through the horror. But he insisted the movie soften the reality, fearing the truth would be too painful for post-war audiences. The result was an inspiring myth built over unimaginable loss. The credits say, based on a true story, but the true story was soaked in blood, not triumph. The tunnels were built twice, once for real, once for film. When the production team arrived in Bavaria, they built 3 real full-size tunnels codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry, exactly like the originals. Each had authentic wood supports, air pumps, and escape shafts, stretching 30 feet underground. But there was a problem. The soil wasn't stable enough to film inside. So, the crew had to rebuild the tunnels again above ground, on sound stages making them just deep enough for cameras to move through. The production designer, Fernando Carrere, even used British POW diaries to match the clay texture and sand traps. When the extras crawled inside, many reported feeling claustrophobic, saying it was too real. One even panicked during filming and had to be pulled out. It wasn't method acting, it was genuine fear in the dark. Charles Bronson's real-life trauma made his role authentic. Bronson's portrayal of the tunnel digger, Danny Valinsky, wasn't just acting, it was memory. During World War II, Bronson actually served as a tail gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces, surviving missions over Japan. He suffered from severe claustrophobia after years inside tight bomber turrets. So, when the script described Danny's breakdown underground, it mirrored Bronson's own panic attacks. Co-star David McCallum recalled seeing him shake after long takes. "He wasn't faking it," McCallum said. "He was fighting the same fear he'd carried from the war." Bronson later admitted it was one of the hardest roles of his life, because he didn't need to imagine the terror. He'd lived it. The barbed wire fence was real and dangerous. Unlike many war sets of the era, The Great Escape used genuine barbed wire. The production team sourced hundreds of meters of actual fencing from decommissioned military sites in Germany. But the rusted wire proved a real hazard. Multiple extras were injured, including one who sliced open his arm while climbing it during a rehearsal. The stunt coordinator wanted to replace it with rubber props, but the director John Sturgis refused. He said the danger made the actors move naturally, more cautiously, like real prisoners. That authenticity paid off, but not without scars. One assistant joked, "You didn't need to act afraid of the fence. You just had to touch it once." James Garner's scams weren't just scripted. Garner's charming scrounger character wasn't entirely fiction, it was inspired by Garner himself. During his time serving in the Korean War, Garner became known for trading supplies, borrowing parts, and fixing equipment with charm and quick thinking. When director Sturgis learned this, he let Garner ad-lib scenes where he swindled cigarettes or radios from guards. Garner later said, "I didn't have to research the role. I was the scrounger." His performance was so convincing that real WE2 veterans on set saluted him for capturing their survival spirit. It was proof that sometimes the best acting comes from life itself. The film almost starred Richard Harris instead of McQueen. Before McQueen signed on, Richard Harris was the front-runner for Hiltz. But Harris demanded script control and top billing, two things McQueen would later fight for himself. When the studio refused, Harris walked away, paving the path for McQueen's breakout role. Ironically, McQueen later caused the same headaches Harris would have. But unlike Harris, McQueen's charisma made him indispensable. The Great Escape might have worked with another star, but it would never have had that effortless cool that only McQueen could bring. The motorcycle was not a Wotvun model. That famous motorcycle chase, the film's most iconic sequence, wasn't historically accurate. The bike McQueen used was a 1961 Triumph TR6 Trophy, a model that didn't exist in 1944. The film crew dressed it up to look like a wartime BMW by adding fake parts, mud, and dull paint. When fans noticed, the studio brushed it off. Historical accuracy didn't matter. Cinematic thrill did. That gamble paid off. The stunt became one of cinema's most replayed moments and cemented McQueen's image as Hollywood's king of rebellion. Donald Pleasance trained the cast in POW psychology. Donald Pleasance, who played the blind forger, had survived a real German POW camp after his plane was shot down. He used his experience to coach younger cast members, teaching them how prisoners walked, spoke quietly, and even avoided eye contact with guards. When he suggested corrections during shooting, McQueen reportedly scoffed until he learned Pleasance's advice came from personal survival. After that, McQueen started calling him Sir. Pleasance later said, "It was strange to act what I once lived," and that the movie helped him process memories he'd buried for 2 decades. The German extras were actually American soldiers. To fill hundreds of guard roles, the production hired off-duty American troops stationed nearby in West Germany. The soldiers took their roles seriously, maybe too seriously. One even saluted McQueen mid-take, forgetting his character was supposed to be the enemy. The director kept it in as an ironic touch of confusion. By the end of filming, many of those same soldiers admitted the experience changed their perception of wartime POWs, seeing courage not just in combat, but in survival. The cast had to learn how to starve. To appear convincingly malnourished, several actors went on monitored calorie-restricted diets for weeks before shooting the camp scenes. David McCallum said the crew ate like prisoners, often subsisting on soup and bread. Only McQueen ignored the plan, sneaking burgers between takes. Their physical deterioration gave the film a haunting realism, especially during the tunnel sequences. One actor fainted during a scene, and Sturgis refused to cut the camera, saying the collapse looked too real to waste. Real POWs visited the set and broke down in tears. Halfway through production, the filmmakers invited surviving escapees from the original Stalag Luft III to visit. What happened shocked everyone. The veterans walked the reconstructed camp in silence, some trembling, others weeping. One whispered, "It's like going back to hell." The cast stood frozen. Suddenly, the movie didn't feel like entertainment, It felt like resurrection. Sturgis later said that moment changed the tone of the entire shoot. From then on, every actor treated each scene like a tribute, not just a role. If you're hooked on these secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe, because we're only halfway through, and the wildest ones are still coming. Steve McQueen's helmet trick was improvised. That rhythmic bouncing of the baseball in the cooler, totally unscripted. McQueen added it to give his silent scenes life. The prop master handed him a glove and a ball before shooting, and McQueen started tossing it out of boredom. The director rolled camera, and it became the film's signature image. That single gesture captured everything about Hiltz: defiance, boredom, control. It wasn't in the script, it was instinct. A small motion that made a giant impact. The movie premiered in a real prison. For its European debut, The Great Escape was screened for Allied veterans inside a converted POW camp near Munich. Many attendees had been held in similar conditions. When the final chase played, the audience erupted in applause, then tears. It was both cathartic and devastating, a reunion of ghosts through film. The event became legendary, proving that movies could heal even the deepest wounds of history. Steve McQueen and James Garner didn't get along. Off camera, their chemistry wasn't friendly. McQueen viewed Garner as too polished, while Garner thought McQueen was a prima donna. The tension came to a head during a publicity shoot when McQueen refused to stand beside Garner, saying, "Hiltz doesn't share the spotlight." Ironically, their clashing personalities gave their scenes a realistic friction, the kind that makes the film feel alive with unspoken rivalry. The crew hid a real war hero among extras. Among the hundreds of background actors moving through the prison camp, one man carried the real blueprint of the escape in his memory. His name was Flight Lieutenant Wally Floody, the very engineer who designed the original Stalag Luft III tunnels in 1944. Floody had been captured early in the war and spent years meticulously planning how to dig beneath the Nazis' noses. After surviving the real escape and its aftermath, he served as the film's technical advisor. The filmmakers even placed him among the extras, blending him into the background like a ghost walking through his own past. He coached Charles Bronson on how to brace his shoulders when crawling through narrow tunnels and corrected the set designers on the texture of the sand, insisting it had to collapse in your face if you breathed wrong. For the cast, Floody's calm presence added gravity to every scene. When he quietly told them that 50 of his friends never made it home, the set fell silent. No one dared joke for the rest of the day. Floody later said watching the movie felt like seeing ghosts move again. He wasn't just a consultant, he was the soul of The Great Escape, buried inside its fiction. Steve McQueen refused a body double. If you thought Steve McQueen's motorcycle chase was thrilling, imagine performing it without permission or protection. That's exactly what happened. McQueen, obsessed with authenticity, insisted on doing almost all of his own writing, despite the studio's objections. The leap over the barbed wire fence became one of cinema's most iconic moments, but it almost didn't happen. Insurance forbade McQueen from performing the main jump. So, after much persuasion, his close friend and fellow rider Bud Eakins stepped in for that single high-risk shot. However, what fans rarely realize is that every other scene, the chases, slides, turns, and near crashes, was pure McQueen. He pushed the Triumph TR6 trophy to its limits, defying both safety rules and filming schedules. He even disguised himself as one of the German soldiers chasing him, riding both bikes in different takes to capture multiple angles. Director John Sturgis said, "You couldn't tell McQueen where to stop. The man was his own stunt team." When the film premiered, audiences gasped at the leap, not knowing it was born from McQueen's refusal to fake anything. That blend of recklessness and artistry defined him. He didn't just act cool, He earned it, one near-death stunt at a time. A deleted scene showed the fate of the survivors. The ending of The Great Escape feels triumphant. The music swells, and a few survivors ride into the sunset. But that wasn't the director's original vision. John Sturges filmed a haunting postscript that showed the surviving POWs back in camp, receiving the devastating news that 50 of their comrades had been executed by the Gestapo. According to production notes, the scene showed James Donald's character standing in stunned silence as the names were read aloud. No dialogue, just the sound of the wind over the empty compound. The moment reportedly moved test audiences to tears, but the studio thought it was too bleak for mainstream release. The footage was cut, and no copies have ever been found. Only a few behind-the-scenes photos confirm it existed. Some believe it was destroyed to maintain the film's hopeful tone. If that scene had remained, The Great Escape might have ended not as a rousing adventure, but as a memorial, a reminder that victory often comes at unbearable cost. The cut may have softened the blow, but it also erased the movie's most honest moment, the pain behind the heroism. It accidentally became a prison break blueprint. No one intended it, but The Great Escape turned into a real-life instruction manual for prison breaks. The movie's detailed depiction of tunnel engineering, guard manipulation, and psychological tricks fascinated not only audiences, but criminals and even intelligence agencies. British military instructors reportedly showed clips of the film to teach teamwork under confinement, citing its depiction of organized resistance in captivity. Meanwhile, several real inmates across Europe and the US copied methods from the movie hollowing out walls, using air pumps, and hiding dirt exactly as shown on screen. In 1979, officials at a German prison discovered an unfinished tunnel whose design matched The Great Escape almost exactly. When questioned, the escapees said, "We learned it from the movies." It's ironic a film meant to honor wartime bravery ended up influencing modern escape attempts. But it also revealed the power of cinema to teach, inspire, and sometimes mislead. The movie blurred the line between art and manual, proving that when Hollywood gets something right, people might just try it for real. The film's legacy outran history. When the film first premiered, critics called it too entertaining for such tragedy. Yet over time, The Great Escape became something larger than a war movie. It became a legend of endurance. For the families of the real prisoners, the movie was bittersweet. They loved that their loved ones were remembered, but mourned how their suffering became spectacle. Decades later, in 2012, the descendants of those 50 executed officers gathered at the original campsite in Żagań, Poland. Under the night sky, they watched The Great Escape projected onto a white canvas. As the final music played, silence fell. One elderly survivor whispered, "Now they're free again." That moment captured everything the film stood for, the illusion of freedom becoming real, if only through remembrance. The Great Escape wasn't just about tunnels or bikes or stardom. It was about humanity clawing for light through darkness. Even 60 years later, the film still reminds us that courage doesn't always mean victory. Sometimes it simply means refusing to give up. The Great Escape wasn't just about breaking out of a prison. It was about breaking through fear, ego, and the limits of what cinema could do. What began as a war story became a symbol of defiance itself. Every frame hides a mix of truth and myth, pain and pride. But what do you think was this Hollywood's greatest war film or its greatest illusion? Drop your thoughts below, hit like, and subscribe for more secrets behind the silver screen.